Welcome to the Ultimate Achilles Survivor Powers tier list. If you're diving into this epic game, you know that finding the right power can really make or break your run. From epic weapons to game-changing abilities, each power in Achilles Survivor has the potential to elevate your gameplay to the next level, or leave you scrambling for your life. In this video, we're breaking down the best of the best and the ones you might want to avoid so you'll know exactly what to pick when it matters most. Let's face it, not all powers are created equal in Achilles Survivor. Some will have you feeling unstoppable, while others might just get you killed. Whether you're unlocking new abilities or trying to optimize your loadout, we've got you covered with the lowdown on which powers reign supreme and which ones could use a little extra love. Stick around as we rank them all, so you can crush your enemies and survive another round in style. I'm quickly moving on to the video and I'm ranking powers in Achilles Survivor. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The powers in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Hydra's Fang, Talos' March, and Rolling Boulder. Alright, let's dive right into some of the absolute worst powers in Achilles Survivor. I'm talking about those abilities that, honestly, might just make you question your choices. First up, we've got Hydra's Fang. On paper, it sounds cool. Sharp fangs erupting from the ground behind your survivor. But in practice, it's one of the most frustrating powers to use. The cooldown feels like it takes forever, and the damage per second is almost laughable. You're better off running away and praying it hits something at all. Seriously, this one is a total letdown. Then, there's Talos' March. This one summons the specter of a giant mythical being that's supposed to crush enemies in its path. Sounds awesome, right? Well, here's the thing, it's super RNG. Whether it actually does any good depends entirely on chance. And let's not forget how bad it is against single targets. If you're up against a boss or a solo enemy, this power pretty much just takes a nap. Not exactly the kind of help you want when you're in the thick of things. Next up is Rolling Boulder, brought to you by Brontes the Boulder Thrower. This one rolls a slow-moving boulder towards the closest enemy, and the damage? Honestly, it's pretty good, really solid. But hold your horses, because this power comes with its own quirks. The boulder can get lost if there are too many enemies around, and sometimes it just doesn't hit what you want it to. On top of that, the total DPS isn't as great as you'd hope. So while the damage is decent when it hits, it's not reliable enough to count on for consistent damage. In the grand scheme of things, these three powers fall squarely in the D tier of Achilles Survivor. They might look flashy at first, but when it comes to delivering on what you need, they tend to disappoint. If you want to win, you're better off looking elsewhere for your power-ups. But hey, at least they're fun to try out when you're feeling experimental. The powers in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Agamemnon's Wrath, Wrath of Ares, Prince of Troy Gear, and Sharp Blade. Alright, let's talk about some of the more interesting powers in Achilles Survivor, specifically from the C tier. Now, don't get me wrong, these powers have their moments, but if you're looking to really make an impact in battle, you might want to aim for something a little more reliable. But hey, let's dive in anyway and see what makes these C-tier powers tick. First up, we've got Agamemnon's Wrath. This one's a bit of a wildcard, literally. You're calling down exploding hammers from the sky, which sounds awesome, right? I mean, who doesn't love a good nuke? The thing is, while the damage is pretty solid, the cooldown is forever, and on top of that, it's super random. You never really know where those hammers are going to land, so it's more about praying for a good hit than relying on precision. Fun? Yes. Practical? Not so much. Next is Wrath of Ares. This power is all about smashing everything around you with a huge explosion, but here's the thing, it's got that long cooldown again, which means you'll be waiting a while to unleash the next burst of damage. It's solid when it hits, especially in an AoE situation, but don't count on it to melt down single targets. It's definitely a better fit for crowd control than picking off enemies one by one. So while it can be great in a group fight, it's not going to shine in those one-on-one showdowns. Then we've got Prince of Troy Gear, and oh boy, Hector's gear is all about defense. A sword slashes through enemies, and a shield will protect you and send enemies flying. This one's a solid choice for survivability, especially if you're just starting out. You get decent protection and a bit of AoE damage, but the downside is, well, you're not going to be winning any DPS awards with this. It's basically a dodge and survive kind of power. If you're more into outlasting your enemies than obliterating them, this one's for you. Finally, we have Sharp Blade with Diomedes the Brave Officer. Now this one's a bit of a mixed bag. It's a simple sword cut that deals okay AoE and single target damage. The big issue, the range is a bit lacking and it really requires you to be on point with your movement to maximize that DPS. If you're feeling nimble and can dance around the battlefield, you'll do fine. But if you like standing your ground and blasting away, this might not be your go-to. So yeah, these C-tier powers might not be the best of the best, but they can definitely have their uses if you're looking to experiment and have some fun with your gameplay. Sure, they won't carry you through the hardest fights, but sometimes it's nice to mix things up and take a more unconventional approach. Just keep in mind, you're probably going to need a lot of patience and a bit of luck to really make the most of them. The powers in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Firework, Shield Throw, Runic Strike, and Myrmidon Spear. Alright, so we're diving into the world of Achilles Survivor today, and we're talking about the B tier powers. These might not be the absolute top picks, but trust me, they're far from useless. In fact, if used right, these abilities can totally carry your team in certain situations. Let's break them down, shall we? First up, we've got Firework, which is as flashy as it sounds. Picture this. Exploding fireworks are thrown all around your survivor. The cool part? It has a short cooldown, so you can keep tossing these fireworks like there's no tomorrow. The AoE, area of effect, damage is solid, meaning you can really clear out groups of enemies fast. However, there's a catch. It's not great for single target damage, and the fireworks can be a bit unpredictable. RNG at its finest. So, if you're looking for something consistent, Firework might not always hit the mark. Then there's Shield Throw, a trusty classic. You toss a shield and it bounces between enemies, dealing damage as it does. It's got that solid AoE DPS vibe, perfect for wiping out clusters of enemies. But, much like Firework, it struggles a bit with single target damage. And let's not forget, it can feel a little RNG heavy. The shield might not always land where you need it to, which can be a bummer when you're aiming for precision. Now, let's talk about Runic Strike. This one's a fun one. You unleash an enchanted runic sphere that explodes with a curse effect once it hits an enemy. We're talking big damage here, and solid AoE to back it up. The downside? Well, precision is key. To really maximize the damage from this power, you'll need to move like a pro. The higher the skill, the better the payoff, but it's not as forgiving as some other abilities if you miss that perfect moment. And finally, we've got Myrmidon Spear, Achilles' signature move. This one is all about precision. You're thrusting at enemies nearby with pinpoint accuracy, delivering excellent single target DPS. If you're facing off against a single boss or elite enemy, this power shines. But here's the trade-off. It really lacks AoE, so when you're dealing with swarms, you might find yourself wishing for a bit more splash damage. Still, when used in the right circumstances, it's a beast. So, in conclusion, these B-tier powers all have their pros and cons, but with the right strategy and timing, they can make a big difference. Firework and Shield Throw are solid for crowd control. Runic Strike can dish out some insane damage when you nail the movement, and Myrmidon Spear is a powerhouse for taking down that one tough enemy. It's all about finding what works best for you and knowing when to bring these bad boys into action. Trust me, just because they're not S-tier doesn't mean they won't get the job done. The powers in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Frenzy Axes, Griffin's Claw, Titan's Blade, Easter Eggs, Deadeye Arrows, and Dual Axes. Let's talk about some of the coolest powers in Achilles Survivor that are sure to make your gameplay a whole lot more exciting. These powers don't just deal damage, they'll make you feel like a total badass while you're slicing, dicing, and causing chaos. First up, let's check out Frenzy Axes. Frenzy Axes throw fiery axes at the nearest enemy, and when they hit, they trigger a fan of smaller axes in the opposite direction. Pretty awesome, right? The AoE damage is solid, and honestly, hitting enemies behind you can be a game changer. But it's got a bit of RNG in there, so sometimes you're just at the mercy of where those axes end up. Still, if you like dealing with large groups of enemies, this power is a blast. Next, we've got Griffin's Claw, and this one's a beast when it comes to DPS. You throw a ridiculous amount of poisoned claws at enemies in front of you. If you're up against a tough single enemy, this will melt them in no time. However, if you want to maximize the damage output, it does require some really good movement. But hey, if you're nimble with your controls, you'll be dishing out damage like a pro. Moving on to Titan's Blade, this one's got a lot of love for both AoE and single target DPS. The blade cleaves through enemies around you, making it great for clearing groups and holding your own against bosses. The best part? It doesn't require any fancy movement, just swing it around and it gets the job done. That said, it's not quite as effective as some other powers when you're facing off against bosses, so keep that in mind if you're looking to take down the big guys fast. Now, if you're in the mood for a bit of randomness, Easter Eggs, Electrion. The god of chickens is something you'll want to try. With this power, you leave behind eggs that explode with random effects on contact with enemies. The DPS is solid, but it's the random effects that make it super fun. Some of them can be game changers, but here's the catch. You've got to keep moving constantly to really make it work. If you're up for a little chaos though, this is definitely one to experiment with. On the more straightforward side, we have Deadeye arrows. Paris, the slayer of Achilles, fires arrows straight at enemies in front of you. This one's great for both AoE and single target damage, and it has decent range. However, to really maximize the DPS, you'll need to nail your movement. It's not a power that you can just spam. Precision is key here, but when you've got it down, it's very reliable. Lastly, we've got dual axes. Think sweeping axe attacks that slash enemies in front of you. It's another solid power for both AoE and single target damage, but just like Deadeye arrows, it requires some precise movement to be truly effective. If you're the type of player who loves to be in control of every swing, this one will definitely fit your playstyle. There you have it, a rundown of some of the top tier powers in Achilles Survivor. Each one offers something a little different, whether you're a fan of chaos, precision, or just good old brute force. Which power is your favorite? The powers in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Blades of Madness, Chimera Spikes, Deadly Dagger, Apollo's Light, and Eternal Rock. Let's dive into the top tier powers in Achilles Survivor. These bad boys aren't just for show, they absolutely dominate the battlefield. If you're looking to clear waves and shred through enemies like a pro, these powers will be your best friends. Let's break down some of the absolute best that will help you carry the game. First up, we've got Blades of Madness. Now, this power is wild. You've got deadly blades swirling around you and they change direction after each hit. Not only does it wreck enemies in close proximity, but it's also fantastic for AoE, area of effect, damage. It's one of the best powers in the game when you want to deal with a crowd or just melt down those single target bosses. If you're all about making sure no one gets too close, this is a must-have. Then there's Chimera Spikes. Imagine launching these dangerous spikes right at the closest enemy. Sounds pretty lethal, right? That's because it is. This power's main strength lies in its amazing single target DPS. It can tear through enemies with precision, and it doesn't take much to turn the tide of battle in your favor. If you love sniping down foes one by one, Chimera Spikes will feel like your personal executioner. Next, we've got Deadly Dagger, and I'm not just talking about any regular dagger. I'm talking about a power that's as dangerous as it sounds. This is where you unleash a barrage of daggers around you, hitting everything in sight. This power has excellent AoE and single target DPS, making it incredibly versatile. Whether you're swarmed by enemies or focusing on a boss, Deadly Dagger has got your back. Apollo's Light brings a touch of magic to the table. With magical orbs circling around you, this power combines a mix of style and substance. The AoE and single target DPS are top notch, making it a solid pick for any situation. These orbs don't just look cool either, they hit like a truck. If you want something that gives you that wizardly vibe while also helping you clear enemies with ease, Apollo's Light is the way to go. And finally, Eternal Rock. Let's be honest, who doesn't love a little poison in their life? This power surrounds you with a rotten aura that deals poison damage to enemies. It's not just for AoE fans though, it also gives you a unique edge with poison damage. It's one of the best powers in the game when you need to chip away at enemy health over time. That lingering poison effect? Super handy, especially when you're up against tougher foes. So, there you have it. These powers are in the S tier for a reason. Whether you're looking to blast through enemies with AoE, take down tough bosses, or poison your way to victory, these abilities are your ticket to dominating Achilles Survivor. You'll feel unstoppable as you unlock and wield these powers, taking your gameplay to the next level. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.